Jackson in the key. Kick out. Davenport.
A steal for Kentucky. Ahead to Reeves. Left wing three. Got it. Jackson weaves.
A dunk. Bounces off to Adu and he slams it home.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Student Section. This is a podcast all about men's SEC hoops. I do want to mention, obviously last episode I covered the NBA, and I think more frequently as we get into the off season of men's college basketball, I'm going to cover more NBA stuff. But yeah, basically the whole this whole off season recording process is going to go there's gonna be like about 3 stages. The first stage I'm gonna be pretty much recapping on this past season, like what today's episode is gonna be. Which today's episode I'm gonna be grading each NBA team, as you could tell by the title. No, not each NBA team. Sorry, now I'm getting confused. Each SEC team, as you could tell by the title. The second stage I'm gonna be covering a lot of draft stuff. Hopefully that can get some good content out of that. And then the third and final stage for this recording process of this off season is going to be predictions for this upcoming season and what I'm expecting out of each team, stuff like that. But yeah, the bed is made. I'm not shaved, but it's fine. I do want to cover a few just things that are in the news, just some news that's going around the league right now. Current topics, I guess. And unfortunately, it will be a lot of Arkansas and Kentucky stuff just because that's kind of what's in the news right now. But Arkansas hired a new assistant coach. I think I covered last episode that Kentucky had gotten their new head coach, Mark Pope, out of BYU. Adu Thiero out of he played Kentucky last year. He officially announced that he has his top 5 teams settled down. I can't remember exactly which teams they were. I think UConn. I know UConn was one. Maybe Penn State might have been one, or maybe I'm just lying. But I know UConn, Arkansas, and Kentucky. So it's interesting kind of to see where he might end up at. Another thing that was announced is Janai Broome is officially returning to college basketball and to Auburn. He's not going anywhere. Which, in my opinion, I don't think he had much draft stock anyways. His mode of player isn't really needed in the NBA, especially since his post skills aren't good enough for the NBA. He's not athletic enough. So I'm glad to see him stay here and develop another year. This might be his year to win Player of the Year now that Dalton Connect is out, or he's probably going to be out. Mark Sears might end up being out. This might be his year to win Player of the Year. So shout out Janai Broome, shout out Auburn. You're keeping a good one. I think that's everything I wanted to cover. I can't think of anything else that has been happening. I don't think there were any coach firings, stuff like that. Obviously, actually this happened a while ago, but South Carolina losing Michi Johnson is a big one. But I think they'll be able to bounce back. You guys have Colin Murray Boyles. I'll talk about this later. But I think that's all the news I wanted to cover. If I forget something, I'll bring it up later. And I am recording this the Friday, the 19th, which is, I'm recording this before the playing games happen today, which I believe is the Bulls playing the Heat, and then we have the Kings playing the Pelicans. They haven't happened yet. I do kind of want to recap on the games. Pretty much everyone's already talked about it by now, so by the time this episode is out, it's going to be kind of old news. But Steph Curry, the big 3, the dynasty is over. Where will Klay Thompson end at? I have no idea. What will happen with Draymond Green? He's probably going to stay. Nobody wants him. What's going to happen with Wiggins? Those guys, not sure. Chris Paul, don't know. But yeah, that team might look a lot different next year. Shout out the Kings for beating them. They played a pretty good game. They did really good defensively. Against Steph Curry, you had Keon Ellis, and then I don't know why I can't remember. Keegan Murray. Those two did a really good job against Steph Curry. They pretty much just said anyone else can beat us except for Steph. Shout out Mike Brown, ex-coach of the Warriors, for those of you who don't know. He's one of my favorite coaches in the NBA. I've seen clips of him at practice where he's literally practicing with the team, running around, showing emotion. I love that guy. Pelicans versus Lakers. Sucks that Zion got injured. I think he had 40 in that game. He was just dominant, getting to the paint at will, finishing through any sort of contact, going at AD's chest, just finishing easily because he's so big. But he's injured, and I believe they said he won't be back for the playing game, or he's questionable maybe. Maybe they listed him as questionable, but that's not good for the Pelicans. If I were to take a guess, I would assume the Kings win tonight. And I also believe that the Heat... You know what? I'm going to go ahead and say the Bulls win tonight. They've been playing really good. The Heat will be without Jimmy Butler, as he has MCL problems. Sorry, I'm trying to fix my monitor. But they will be without Jimmy Butler. I think the Kings are going to win tonight, and I think that the Bulls are going to win tonight. Now, neither of those teams are going to win their actual playoff series. I don't believe so. So that doesn't really matter, honestly, who wins. But yeah, that's what I believe is going to happen. 76ers versus the Heat. I already mentioned that Jimmy Butler got injured, but this was a game that the Heat should have won. I mean, you look at the top three players for the 76ers, Maxey, Embiid, and Tobias Harris. None of those guys had stellar games. Joel Embiid did decent, but for his standard, he didn't have a good game. Same with Tyrese Maxey. It just wasn't a good game for the 76ers. Shout out Nicholas Batum and shout out Buddy Hield. And then shout out my boy Pierre. He said the Buddy Batum combo ended up winning them that game, which I agree with. And the Miami Heat just don't have any offense. I mean, this has been prevalent all year, especially without Jimmy Butler now in the lineup. It's pretty much just Tyler Hero. I mean, they have Terry Rozier now, but he's injured, so it doesn't even matter. Bam Adebayo is decent. He just doesn't take the shots you'd want him to take. So yeah, shout out them. I don't think they're going to win this next game. If they do end up winning it, they're not beating the Celtics. So either way, it doesn't really matter who's winning, like I said. I think that's all the games I want to cover. Bulls Heat wasn't very interesting. Kobe White and DeMar DeRozan just put on a stellar performance. Trae Young didn't do too good. DeJounte Murray did good. DeAndre Hunter took like 17 shots, which is something he shouldn't be taking that many shots. But I mean, at that point, who else is scoring for them? Jalen Johnson is out for them as well, so that also hurts. Overall, they were some good games, and there were also some, honestly, 3 of the games were good, and then that Bulls Heat game, or the Bulls Hawks game, honestly, it was fun. It just, who cares about those 2 teams? They're just irrelevant. I think I mentioned that in my last episode too. But yeah, now that is all out of the way, we can get into the meat of the episode. I was trying to think of the saying, but yeah, we can get into the main part where I'm grading each college SEC men's basketball team. I'm grading their past seasons. And before I get into the gradings, I want to, you know what, we'll switch over real quick and then I'll talk about this. All right, so what I wanted to say before I switched over, which hopefully I haven't switched over in editing yet, but I just want to mention that these grades aren't based off of their overall record, right? Because that would be easy. We already know which teams would be at the top. Tennessee, Alabama, those teams would be at the top. It is based off of preseason expectations. What we expect, and pretty much just throughout the season, what we expected out of these teams. Did they live up to the hype? Did they overachieve? Did they underachieve? Did they do some things that wasn't really expected? That kind of stuff. I'm not just going to be simply ranking it based off their team success, because that would be easy to do. As simple as that. It would be easy to do. So let's go ahead and get straight into these rankings. All right, so as you can see, the first team we're covering, we are going to be doing this alphabetically. So if your team is lower in the alphabet, sorry, any Texas team. And I also want to mention I'm not going to be ranking Texas and OU because they technically are not in the SEC yet. At least this past season they weren't, so there's no point in ranking them. All right, Alabama, they get an A-. And for the reasons you can see on the screen, they had that Final Four appearance. Mark Sears played out of his mind this year. He put the pretty much all of college basketball on notice because of that playoff or that March Madness run. So shout out to him. They were only 5th in the SEC, which is kind of low. That is I honestly probably should have put that in cons, but I mean 5th out of 14 teams, that's pretty good. And they had the best offense in the SEC by far. So pretty much everything this team did, they did really well. And sorry if the lighting keeps switching. I'm using my MacBook as lighting right now. So hopefully it looks fine. But yeah, they had a lot of pros this season. I think, honestly, I probably could have put them at a B+. But I think that Final Four appearance for them, it skyrockets the overall grade. Because I mean, Final Four, there's only 4 teams in all of college basketball that make it there. Out of the 64 in the tournament and like the 200 teams that qualify for the tournament, being top 4 in that tournament is amazing. that honestly, yeah, I agree with the grade I gave them now. I'm not even gonna try and change the grade. I think they deserve the A minus. Like I said, Mark Sears had a stellar season. I already went over all of this. The only thing that's keeping them from an A to an A plus, I have to mention one more thing. No team will be receiving an F minus, and no team will be getting an A plus. Because I think an A plus means you have to have a perfect season, perfect record, top of your conference. You have to win your conference playoff games or your conference tournament, and then the March Madness tournament. No one did that, right? No one had a perfect season. And an F minus means that there has to be nothing good you can take out of this season, meaning they didn't win any games. Preseason, pre-conference, in-conference, postseason, they did nothing good. No teams are on either end of the spectrum, but there are some that are close. Just saying. But yeah, moving on to the cons with Alabama. Obviously, they had that early SEC tournament exit. They lost their first game to Florida, I believe, which I predicted. If you go back and look at my SEC tournament predictions, I predicted that they would lose. So shout out me. And they had the worst defense in the SEC, one of the worst defense in the entire College Basketball Association. They were on both ends of the spectrum. They were the best offense, worst defense. But in the March Madness tournament, they honestly had a really good defense. They really did. It was honestly, I feel like looking at them play, I feel like it's kind of switched back and forth. I feel like Mark Sears was the only one scoring, and their defense was pretty good. So, with that being said, this is their overall grade, A minus. I don't think there's anything else I want to say about this team. Shout out Nate Oates. He has proven that he is one of the best coaches in the entire association, let alone the SEC. He runs the best offense in the league. Shout out Nate Oates. I remember seeing a bunch of conspiracies, or not conspiracies, but people saying that he might take the Arkansas job, he might take the Kentucky job, he might take the BYU. Nate Oates says he's not going anywhere. I promise you he's not going anywhere. So Alabama fans, you guys don't have to worry. He's not going anywhere. He is your guys' new Nick Saban. Nick Saban left. I know they were both coaching at the same time, but Nick Saban left. Nate Oates came in. I promise you guys are good with him. Next team, my Arkansas Razorbacks. Every time I mention them and say they're my team, look in the back. I have their jersey, Anthony Black. Shout out Anthony Black. But yeah, their grade is a D. I remember preseason rankings predicted that Arkansas would be the fourth best team in the SEC. They were not the fourth best team in the SEC. I can guarantee you that. I have a lot I want to talk about this team, but I don't want to rant too much just because they are my favorite team. I have a lot I want to say. I think a lot of that was Coach Muss's coaching scheme. You look at our roster, we had an amazing roster. That's why everyone thought we were going to be where we were, but it just didn't come to fruition. So some of our pros, we had Tremont Mark. He led our team in scoring. I think he was at he was like 17.1 points per game, maybe something like that. He was our leading scorer. He was one of our best defenders. He pretty much anchored this team. There were a lot of games where it looked like nobody else really wanted to play except for him. He looked like the only player who constantly went in and out, wanted to win, was constantly just getting to the rim with will, not letting our team lose. If it weren't for him, we probably would have lost every game this season. We would have been the next Missouri. Shout out Tremont Mark. We did have our late season push. We didn't win a lot of games, but we started to build up a little bit. Like I said, pros are going to be kind of hard to find for these lower ranked teams, but we did have our little late season push. We played a lot better at the end, even though the score or like the overall record doesn't show it at the end. We play teams like Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, and we got really close to beating these teams. So we did play better. And Caleb Battle had 42 points in one game. He led I think he's now the all-time leading scorer for points in a single game for Arkansas. He scored the most points in a single game for all SEC players, and I think he was up near the top for all college men's basketball players, not women. Shout out Juju Watkins. But yeah, I think Caleb Battle, he also was a part of that late season push. He was kind of intertwined with that, where both our team and Caleb Battle started to do better at the end. Coincidence? I think not. But yeah, because it does help having more than one scorer. And cons, there are a lot of them. We were 12th in the SEC. We were 16 and 17 total. This is our total record. We were below 500 total record. That is for an SEC team. Whenever we play, I think like 8 preseason games with teams that are not good, except for Duke and Purdue, which Purdue didn't count. Duke did. We beat Duke. It's just not a good season. We had the early SEC exit, and we could not win 2 games in a row. Obviously we won a couple of 2 games in a row, but throughout the entire season, it was almost impossible for us to win 2 games in a row, which is why that 16 and 17 record reflects that. It just wasn't a good season. Hopefully this new season with a whole bunch of new people, we have new coaching staff, new coach, an entirely new roster. We don't have a single player returning. At least as of yet, they might come back, but as of now, none of them are returning. we'll see what happens. I'm excited for it. But yeah, D is a grade for Arkansas. All right, and the next team we have is Auburn. I really wanted to give them an A- too, but then I was like, if I'm giving Alabama an A-, Auburn cannot have an A-. Although I really wanted to because, look at the very first pro, they were the SEC champion. They didn't have the best record, obviously, but they won the SEC tournament. Yeah, I wanted to give them a better grade. I just could not. I just couldn't put them up there with Alabama. Even though, honestly, you could argue they were just as good as Alabama overall through the entire season. But yeah, they won the SEC tournament. Janai Broome was in contention for Player of the Year and Defensive Player of the Year. I thought he should have won Defensive Player of the Year, but he didn't. But I definitely think he should have won that. He was, like I said, contention for Player of the Year. I think he got all SEC first team, all SEC defensive team. Shout out Janai Broome. He was amazing for Auburn. And like I said earlier, he's returning. Shout out Auburn. You guys have a good one coming back. It'll be a good season for him, I can just tell. And Bruce Pearl. I think I mentioned this in my SEC tournament recap episode. Bruce Pearl is, in my opinion, the best coach in the SEC. Obviously not just overall best coach in the SEC. In terms of player development, player recruiting, team building, on-court coaching, all of that. I think Nate Oates has him beat in sort of offensive scheme, but that's the only area I would say he has him beat in. Other than that, I think Bruce Pearl is the most well-rounded coach in the entire league. And they had the second best record in the SEC. If I'm thinking correctly. I think they did have that second seed. You know what? Let me double check that because that doesn't feel right. All right. So I don't believe they had the best record overall, but they had the second best record in conference play, if that makes sense. So yeah, shout out Auburn. They had a really, really good season. Now there were some cons, obviously. Honestly, these might be a little cherry picked, but obviously the early March Madness exit. That's the main one. They lost the very first round to BYU. Which is now the new head coach of Kentucky. That's a little weird. But yeah, they lost to BYU in the very first round. Everyone had, even including me, I had them going deep in the tournament. I think I had them making the Elite Eight. They were supposed to beat... No, they weren't supposed to beat UConn, I think. Anyways, I had them going deep. So that's pretty much the main con. That's the main reason they didn't make that A-. If they would have at least won 1 or 2 games in March Madness, they would have been an A-, maybe even A. I probably would have put them at A if they could have won at least 2 or 3 March Madness games. But other than that, there was the Aiden Holloway conference play. Aiden Holloway came in as a 5-star freshman for this team. He was supposed to be one of their better players. And he just didn't do good in conference play. He did better as of late. And then pre-conference, he did amazing. Amazing in pre-conference play. But during conference, he just wasn't that impactful. I believe he is leaving Auburn. He's in the transfer portal, and I don't think there's really any chance of him coming back. Which sucks for Auburn fans, and I am a little confused as to why Aiden Holloway is entering that portal because it's not Auburn's fault he had a bad season. He got more playing time than what he really deserved. He kept getting a lot of chances for Bruce Pearl. But yeah, Auburn lost a lot of their guards. I believe they lost Katie Johnson, Trey Donaldson, I believe, entered the portal, and then Aiden Holloway entered the portal. I think all 3 of their main guards. I believe they still have Chaney Johnson. I don't know who all they left. I haven't checked in a while, but yeah. And they were also 5 for. Oh my, that was a lot of 5s. They were 5 for 5 on away games in conference play. That's not a very good record, especially for one of the top teams in the SEC, one of the top teams in the country. They were ranked. I think at one point they had reached like 8th power ranking in all of SEC or in all of college basketball and men's basketball. So 5 for 5 on away games in SEC conference play is just not going to cut it. But yeah, overall they had a really good season. I probably could have put them at A- because they did exceed expectations by quite a bit. But yeah, I just couldn't put them in the same grade as Alabama. So they get that B+, which compared to all the other teams in this ranking, that is a really good grade. So it looks kind of bad, like B+, B+, but no, that's a really good grade. Ooh. Okay, sorry, I kind of spoiled it. Hopefully I cut that out. But yeah, next team, Florida. They got a B-. Where do I start? Oh, the pros, obviously. They were the SEC runner-up. They made it to the championship game, lost to the eventual champion, Auburn. But they had a really deep SEC run. Their backcourt With Walter Clayton Jr. and Zion Pullen, they had one of the best. I think they might have had the highest scoring backcourt in all of SEC play. They both averaged like 16 and 17 points wise. Zion Pullen had some good playmaking. Overall, that was just a good positive. I haven't checked their portal, so I'm not sure if these guys either graduated or entered the portal and are leaving. So if they are, that's a little awkward. But yeah, they had a really good season. They had a really good backcourt. I love their coach. Yeah. Another pro is that they had a March bid. They made the March Madness tournament. They weren't expected to really make any noise, but just making the tournament in general is good. I think we had 8 SEC teams that made it, maybe 6. I believe it was 8 though. They were one of the 8 out of the 14. So I mean, it is over half of them made it. But yeah, that March bid is good. And 6 in the SEC, they're pretty much right in the middle. So I don't know if I'd even really call that a pro. But yeah, they were pretty much right in the middle. But the main thing that carried them was that deep SEC run and their just super talented backcourt that they had. And the cons, obviously, like I mentioned earlier, they had an early March exit. But then again, I don't even know if that's really a con because nobody expected them to make it far. I don't remember who they lost to. Maybe, I think it might have been Colorado State. No, it was Colorado, I think, that they had ended up losing to. And I think Colorado ended up losing in the next round anyways. So that's that. And they had an even worse away record than Auburn had. They had a 3-7 away record, which just is not good. And I think they were one of the worst teams in the SEC and all of college basketball in terms of turnovers. I think they were like 197th in college basketball in terms of turnovers. So yeah, they had a lot of turnovers. They had a lot of turnovers. That was pretty much the main flaw to their entire offense, as they were just a turnover-heavy team. And you could see when they played, the stats reflected. And it felt like a lot of times, especially in sort of high-stake games like that Auburn game and then their March Madness game, those turnovers came at costly times, and they just couldn't bounce back from these turnovers that they kept having over and over and over again. So yeah, their overall grade is going to be that B-, and I've already said all the reasons why. So on to the next team, which is Georgia. Their pros are a lot shorter than some of these other teams. They get an overall C- grade. They were just not the best season. Some of the pros you can take away is from their freshman Silas Demery Jr. Once again, I haven't checked the portal. I don't know if he's coming back this year. But the year you got from him showed a lot of positives, a lot of improvement. There's just a lot of upside with this guy. And I think if Georgia's able to keep him, like I said, I don't know if he's staying. I haven't checked. But if they are able to keep him, that's amazing. That is amazing. They can develop this dude and just make a good player out of him. And they're one of the best teams in the league at getting to the free throw line. They drew one of the most fouls. They drew the most fouls in the SEC, or maybe the second most fouls, but they were getting to the line a lot. I think the only team that might have been better was Arkansas. And I could be wrong on that. I haven't checked in a while. So this is just all off of memory. But they were also one of the best teams in the entire league, all of college basketball, at getting to the free throw line. So there isn't many more pros you can say about Georgia. And so we move on to the cons. They were 11th in the SEC out of all teams. I believe they lost in that first round. No. Yeah, they lost. They won the first round because they had ended up beating Missouri, which is the worst team in the league, and then they lost their second round to, I don't remember. They were 11th in the SEC out of 14 teams. That's not good at all. The only teams below them, I think, was Vanderbilt and Missouri, which were also terrible teams in the SEC. They were incredibly inefficient from the field. Had one of the lowest shooting percentages once again in the SEC. They weren't efficient at all. They didn't have any reliable, trustworthy scorers on their team. And yeah, overall low scoring numbers just as a team. Like they had one of the worst offenses in the league, and I don't think they had a single player average more than like 13 or 14 points. Don't fact check me on that, but I know they didn't have really any players average high scoring numbers. And their defense wasn't good either. So they're not scoring, they're not really defending either. I don't remember exactly what their defense was in the SEC. I guess I can look it up real quick, but they didn't have a good defense. There just wasn't much positive to take out of this team. I feel bad for the Georgia fans. Hopefully next year will be better with the development of Silas Demery Jr. Hopefully they get more transfers in. Hopefully they just build a better team. Because pretty much ever since Anthony Edwards has left this team, you guys haven't been too hot. Which sucks for Georgia fans because you had that good year with Anthony Edwards. You had a good player with Anthony Edwards. And since then, there hasn't been too much positive to look at with this team. So yeah, that's Georgia's overall grade with that C-. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next team. All right, and that next team is Kentucky. I think they're getting the same grade as Florida. They're getting a lesser grade than Auburn. And like I said, Auburn had a good grade. So now you guys are starting to see Auburn got a good grade. Yeah, that B-, they pretty much had an average season. I would think a B means they live up to expectations, which they did not. Plain and simple, they did not live up to that. They're pros. Their freshman class was insane. In terms of production, the main guys that produced for them was DJ Wagner, Rob Dillingham, and Reed Shepard. They didn't get much out of Aaron Bradshaw or the other freshman. I can't remember his name right now, but you guys know who I'm talking about. I'm pretty sure he entered for the NBA draft. Or he's in the portal maybe, something like that. Their freshman class was an amazing pro. Once again, Kentucky always has the best freshman classes anyways. They're always like the first or second recruiting class ever. I don't know if that's going to continue with Mark Pope there. I don't know if that's going to change because now that they don't have their head coach, their main recruiter, I don't know how that's going to look. But yeah, just in terms of last season, they had one of the best freshman classes. And they just, in terms of production, they were one of the best production-wise as well. Another pro is they had the second best offense in the entire SEC. And you could see it while watching. Just obviously second best in terms of just overall points per game. But they were hyper efficient. Their best scorers were super efficient from the field. You could watch them play. They had the offense of an NBA team. They were super efficient. A lot of off-ball movement. No one was really ball hog. No one was afraid to pass the ball. It was a fun offense to watch. Another pro is Antonio Reeves. He was in running for Player of the Year. I thought he should have won it. Well, I had picked him to win it. I think Dalton Knecht deserved it, but I think Antonio Reeves had a really good case for Player of the Year, and he is super underrated. I'm seeing him in a whole bunch of like mock drafts, being drafted in like the 50s. He's so underrated, and I'm going to say this now. I'm going to say it again in another episode whenever I do my draft stuff. He will be the biggest like surprise player in this draft class. I'm telling you right now. He's going to get drafted late, and he's going to be super effective, super efficient, just out of the gate. He's an older guard. I think he's like 22, maybe 23. He is going to be good. Mark this down. Antonio Reeves is going to be good in the NBA. I'm telling you right now. There's no hype around him. He needs more hype. And then another pro is they're fourth in the SEC. Like I said, that is if you're in the top 5 or 6, that is a good thing, especially in such a competitive SEC league. You would have liked them to be maybe a little bit higher with the talent they have, but fourth in the SEC is not bad at all. They made they had a double bye in the tournament because they were in the top 4. But let's get into that tournament. This is where the cons start. They had an early SEC exit. They lost their very first round, I think, to Texas A&M. They lost to Texas A&M, or maybe they lost to Texas A&M. And then A&M went on to lose to Florida, but and Texas A&M, they've proven. I'm going to talk about them later. I'm not going to mention them right now. They had an early SEC exit. They lost their first round in the SEC, and then to add on to the top of that, they lost their first game in March Madness as well. I don't remember who they lost to. Was it Duquesne? No, Oakland. They lost to Oakland. Everybody knows the memes. They had the one guy go out there and just shoot crazy. The dude who looks like an accountant went out there and just hooped on Kentucky, made them embarrass them really. But yeah, if it weren't for the 2 early exits in both tournaments, I would have put them probably at a B+. They would have been right around that Auburn range. If they could have just made deeper runs, which they were kind of expected to. I know Kentucky and Coach Calipari have gotten a lot of they got a lot of backlash for this season just because I'm losing my voice. Oh my gosh. I think they're 1-4 in their last March Madness games. In the last 4 seasons, they're 1-4. They've only won 1 game. I don't know. I mean, you can't just look at them getting early exits and just say, oh, they're a bad team. They didn't do good. Because they had a really good regular season. It's just postseason stuff that they didn't do good in. That's pretty much it, which is why they get that B-. All right, LSU. They get a C. I believe they were 10th or 9th maybe in the SEC. They weren't very high. They weren't very low either. I mean, they were pretty low, but not. They were right in the middle pretty much. So let's get straight into the pros of this team. The pros, Jordan Wright, obviously. He had an amazing season for them. He was an amazing on-ball defender. His numbers were out of this world. He was an amazing player for them this year. He led this team in many different ways. Another pro is they were one of the best teams at getting to the free throw line in the SEC. They had the most free throws shot, which is, I think I had said earlier that Arkansas was that team. I think it was LSU now that I remember it. It was like LSU, Georgia, and I don't know, something else like that. Anyways, LSU, they were one of the best teams at getting to the free throw line. I don't think their percentage was anything abnormally high. They were pretty much right in the middle, but they did get to that line. And other pros, they were 12-6 at home. I think this is their total overall record. I don't think this is conference play because that looks like it might be too many games. Yeah, they were pretty good at home. 12-6, that's not like the best record, but it's not bad. It's really not bad. And then their cons. They had a 3-7 away record. If they weren't at their home stadium, they weren't playing very good. Simple as that. Their role players weren't playing very good. They just weren't getting much scoring output while they were away. Another con is their defensive rating. They were one of the worst defenses in the league, including the SEC and college basketball. They had a very poor defense. And another con is they got into foul trouble a lot. They were one of the highest teams in foul numbers. So they got fouled a lot, and they also fouled a lot. They did both. So that kind of mitigates their ability to get to the line if you're going to put the other team at the line as well. Just not the best season from LSU. Their past few seasons just haven't been very good. I think they were the worst in the SEC last year. This year, they're just not it. LSU has not been doing very good recently. Ever since they lost Cam Thomas, those years were pretty good. Just kind of just mid years, which historically they've been a good college at getting NBA talent. They just haven't been able to do it recently. I don't know what the difference is. But yeah, that's LSU's grade. All right, the next team we are covering is going to be Ole Miss. They get that D+ grade, which I think is just a little bit higher than what I gave Arkansas. Ole Miss had a lot of good players. They had a lot of expectations. You look at their pros. The growth that Allen Flanigan had was just, it was out of this world. He went from the year prior, he was Auburn. He was their sixth man. He just went off the bench and scored. That was pretty much all he get in the game, shoot the ball the second you're open. That was pretty much his role. And then he turned into one of the best players for Ole Miss. His defensive growth was the main thing, but his overall offensive production, he was more efficient. He scored more. He was a better playmaker. In that sort of role, you could see him grow, which is a good thing for Ole Miss. I don't know if he's returning. I don't know if he's graduating. I don't know anything about him. But in terms of last season, he was a very good pro for them. They had the sixth defense in the SEC, which is a little bit of a cherry pick. I couldn't find too many pros for this team overall, which sounds bad. But they had a D-. Sixth defense in the SEC, that's pretty much right above average. But that was pretty much led by Allen Flanigan. They had the really tall center. I don't remember his name. He's like 7'3", 7'2", something like that. But yeah. And then their other pro was Matthew Morrell. Just another good player that hopefully they can keep. I don't know what the situation is with him, but if they can keep him, I can't remember if he was a freshman or not. I want to say he was, but I just can't remember for some reason right now. But yeah. And then those are their pros. There are not many of them. And then their cons, their 3-point defense. They allowed the most 3-point shots in pretty much all of college basketball, all of SEC. They were just letting teams shoot the ball. This shows statistically and watching them, they were just letting teams shoot the ball. That's pretty much it. They focused a lot on, they played a lot of drop coverage in the pick and roll, and they didn't really switch much pick and rolls either to pick up shooters. They weren't going over screens. They just weren't doing the right thing to get shooters off of the line. And in a league where this 3-point shooting is starting to develop into more of an emphasis, a focal point, you need that 3-point defense. And because they didn't have it, that kind of reflected in their overall record. Even then, they were kind of in the middle of the league, but in my opinion, if they could have ran more teams off the 3-point line, they would have had a higher record. They would have been in the top 5, in my opinion. And they had the very early SEC exit. I don't remember who they lost to, but they did have that SEC exit early on, and they just weren't good at drawing fouls and getting to the free throw line. They pretty much relied truly on scoring. They didn't get many of those easy buckets. They weren't getting to the line, like I just said. And like I said, this might feel like a pretty harsh grade for Ole Miss, but this is based off of expectations. People expected this team to be good. With Chris Beard as their coach, they had a good lineup. They expected this team to be good, but they didn't live up to those expectations, which is why they have that D+ grade. We're going to move on to that next team. All right. The next team, this will officially be the lowest grade, and like I said, no team is going to get an F-. This team is getting an F. There weren't much pros you can take out of this team. Sean East II, his growth and development, I think I had picked him for my own award as most improved player or breakout player of the year. I believe Sean East was amazing for this team. I think he averaged right around 17 as well. He was pretty much, statistically wise, pretty close to Tremont Mark from Arkansas. This was a guy that I was very, very mad that he did not make all SEC teams. I don't think, what's his name? Jalen Williams out of Auburn. I don't think he should have made the SEC team. There were a few other players I don't think should have made it over Sean East. I think Sean East and Tremont Mark, mainly Sean East, just because he's on the worst team in the league is the only reason he didn't make it. But his numbers, it's not his fault. His team was the worst. I already said this. I'm not going to keep going over it. I said this in another episode where I reviewed each team's awards. But yeah, another pro that they had is they were 7th in free throw percentage in all of college basketball. All of college basketball, they were the 7th best team at shooting from the free throw line. And in terms of pros, it ends there. The cons, the obvious one, they didn't win a single game in SEC conference play. That's just not good. It's just not good. It's not good. That's just, it's still insane to think about that this team didn't win a single game in conference play. Not one game they won. They didn't win a single game in the tournament. Obviously, they lost to Georgia. But it's like, that is bad. That is really, really bad. 0 wins. Like, that's still, I just can't even process that. 18 conference games, and they didn't win a single one. There wasn't one night where the other team just had an off shooting night and they were just on fire. Not one night. They didn't have, like, that just shows they had no, this is going to sound bad. I'm not being disrespectful. They had no skill and they had no luck. Luck could have won them at least one game, and they didn't have that at all. Another con, this reflects their record. They had a bad offense and defense. They were in like the bottom 5 in both of those categories in the SEC. It's just not good for them. They went on a 19-game losing streak, and they were one of the worst rebounding teams in all of college basketball. I could have put way more cons, but I'm not about to be disrespectful. I'm going to put 4 cons. I could have put much more, but these were the main that kind of stood out. Yeah, there's not much to talk about in Missouri. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next team. All right, moving on to the next team, we have Mississippi State with the B-, which I believe is the same grade that Kentucky and Florida also got. Just kind of giving reference as to where these teams all rank against each other. But yeah, one of the pros they had was Josh Hubbard. He was one of the highest scoring. He was the highest scoring freshman in the league. He was one of the highest scoring players in the league. I think he was right about 16 points per game, maybe 17, something around that range. He could have very well made all SEC team. I don't think he did, but he definitely could have. One of the headlining freshmen. He was runner-up for Freshman of the Year award. I think he only ended up losing to Reed Shepherd. I think he would have won if Reed Shepherd didn't win it. But yeah, another pro was they beat Tennessee in the SEC tournament. That was a really, really, really big win for them, beating one of the best teams in all of college basketball, let alone the SEC. The best team in the SEC record-wise. That was a big win for them. They ended up losing to Auburn, which ended up winning the entire tournament. So not much you can say about that. But another pro they had was their offensive rebounding. Shout out Tolu Smith. Shout out, who was their other big man? Can't remember his name. Shout out their bigs. They had one of the best offensive rebounding teams in all of college basketball. Once again, all of SEC basketball as well. And shout out Tolu Smith and Cameron Matthews for anchoring that defense. That is another one of their pros. Is just those defensive guys. Just they had 3 guys out on this team that you could put as pros. So you might be wondering, why is their grade so low? We're getting into the cons now. They had a 2-of-8 away record. If they weren't at home, they're not winning, similar to Florida, or maybe it was LSU. I think it was LSU. Had really bad away records. They had the 11th offense in the SEC. Once again, like I mentioned, they had one of the best defenses in the SEC. Their defense pretty much carried them. Their offense wasn't there. It's pretty much Josh Hubbard score the ball. Maybe someone else can score. We don't know. Maybe if you miss, Tolu Smith will get a putback. Maybe you can kick it out to Cameron Matthews for a corner 3 if he's open. That was pretty much their offense. It was kind of hard to watch, I'm not going to lie. And their other con was their early March exit. You could put that as a pro, them getting in the tournament in general, but they had an early exit. They lost to, I don't even remember. They lost. I think it was maybe the first or second round they lost, and just they didn't make a deep run. And once again, they weren't really a team that was expected to make a deep run either, so you can't really fault them. I don't even know if that really considers as a con. But yeah, that's their grade. That is a B-, and now we are on to the next team. All right, the next team is South Carolina with once again another B-. So they're with who was the team we just reviewed? Mississippi State, They're with Kentucky, and they are also with Florida. So that is now 4 teams that have hit that B-, which is it seems to be about the average score. So they're pros. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. This is gonna be a hard rest of this episode. But pros. Michi Johnson, unfortunately, he ended up leaving in transfer portal. He went to Ohio State, back to where he came from originally. But shout out Michi Johnson. I believe he led them in scoring. He was one of their most entertaining, just in terms of watching him play. He was one of my favorite players to watch this season. We'll get into that in another episode. A little bit of an illusion, but I'm talking about alluding with an A, not an I. Another pro, Colin Murray-Boyles. I believe he is staying this year. I don't know if it's official yet, but I'm pretty much, from everything I've seen, I think he's staying. He reminds me of like a Charles Barkley kind of player, where he is not very tall, but he's very strong. He will back players down. He's a good playmaker out of the post. He's a good defender. His development could be very important for South Carolina next year. But yeah, shout out Carolina fans. You guys are getting another good player. He's staying this year. You guys already know. I think your guys' head coach. Bro, I'm so sorry. Another pro I could have won is put is that you guys ended up winning Coach of the Year. I probably should have put that instead of some of these other ones, but Colin Murray-Boyles, I think your guys' coach was asked in an interview, is he one of the best kept secrets in the league? And he's like, obviously, I don't even know why he is a secret. Colin Murray-Boyles went under the radar this entire season. I think he's due for a big season next year. People are going to get put on notice. Another pro. They had the second best defense in the SEC, and I think I mentioned this in my awards episode. It is weird that they had the second best defense, and you can't really look and see that they had a best defender. They didn't have anybody make the defensive team. I mean, they didn't really have any like true defensive anchor, defensive lock, but as a team they had, which is why I think they won Coach of the Year. You could Colin Murray-Boyles. That's a hard name to say for me. He was a good defender, but he wasn't an elite defender. And they had the 3rd seed in the SEC, which is one of the highest we've seen so far. I think we're still missing the 1 seed, but overall, just an amazing season from them. The only cons they really had was that early March exit. Like many teams here, they had an early March exit, and they had the 2nd worst offense in the SEC. So they are pretty much the opposite of Alabama, where they have the best offense, worst defense. This team has the best defense, worst offense. I probably could have put them honestly at a B, but it's that early March Madness exit. I can't put them much higher. Next team is Tennessee, the team I was just talking about. I do believe they have the highest grade, and for good reason. I'm obviously going to get to it. They didn't really have any cons, which you can read them right now. I'll go over it, obviously. But their pros, don't connect. As simple as that. What else do I have to say? He won Player of the Year. He's looking like being a top 7, top 8, maybe top 9 draft pick. He's 100% going to be a lottery draft pick. He won Player of the Year. He was the best team in this. I think he was like a runner-up, maybe the 3rd overall runner-up. I don't know what that would be called. For Player of the Year over all of college basketball, the John Wooden Award. He only ended up losing it to Zach Edey because it's Zach Edey, putting up just monster numbers. But yeah, amazing season from Dalton Connect. I'm pretty sure he averaged around 20, 21 points after all of March Madness stuff happened. But yeah, he did amazing. You saw it in any sort of tournament play. He was the only player on this team. He carried this team. And he had a backpack on. He had a backpack full of bowling balls, a backpack full of weights. He's deadlifting at the same time. He was carrying this team. He was backpacking this team, hiking up a mountain with all that weight on his back, towing a car. He is pulling this team. They had the best record in the SEC. They had an amazing deep March Madness run. I think they made it to the Elite Eight. Ended up losing to... Who did they end up losing to? Purdue. I think they ended up losing to Purdue, maybe. But they had the best defense in the SEC. And the 5th offense in the SEC. So they had 5 pros. I just couldn't fit them all in here. This was an amazing team to watch. Zakai Ziegler was one of their best defenders. He helped with that. They had Jonas Adu, Awaka. They had a lot of really good defenders on this team. They just didn't really have the offensive players to help support Dalton Connect. And the only con is that early SEC exit where they ended up losing to Mississippi State, like I mentioned earlier. That's really the only thing you can take out of them, which is... Not the only reason, but that's why they didn't get an A+, just because of that early SEC exit. If they would have made a deep run, they could have, like an A, semi-plus maybe. But yeah. Moving on to the next team, I think we only have one more team after this. Is Texas A&M, Texas A&M. And I know you're wondering, how do they have the same grade as Auburn? It is simply because, like I mentioned at the very beginning of this episode, these grades are based off of expectations. Let me say it one more time for those of you in the back. They are based off of expectations. So, the pros. Wade Taylor IV, Tyrese Radford. And I think I mentioned that Florida had the best statistical backcourt. I think this is the best backcourt in terms of scoring, chemistry, and overall team impact. I think this is the best backcourt in all of SEC. Not statistically, but just in general. Another pro. They had that super, super deep March Madness run. I want to go back and cover more about Wade Taylor. He's my favorite player, one of my favorite players to watch in all of SEC. He is he just doesn't give up. He has so much heart, and at his size, he is such an amazing scorer. I think he put up 41 against Arkansas earlier in that season. Amazing. Their deep March Madness run, they ended up losing to the 1 seed Houston. But I think another pro I was going to put on here, I just couldn't fit, is that Anderson Garcia shot. And Anderson Garcia ended up making all defensive team as well, so shout out to him. But that big old buzzer beater that he hit, everybody saw it. Amazing. I love that game. That was probably my favorite game in all of the entire tournament. That A&M versus Houston. It's an in-state rivalry, out-of-conference rivalry. They're both fighting for Texas. Houston eventually ended up winning because they were the better team, but and they also had a very deep SEC run. They beat Kentucky, and I think they ended up losing to Florida. But you could tell they were kind of just burnt out. And they ended up beating Ole Miss, or maybe they beat Georgia. I don't know. But they made it to the semifinals in the SEC tournament. They had a deep run. Their only cons, did I just say early SEC exit? That's not right. So ignore that. They did not have an early SEC exit. I think I meant to say something else. I don't know what I meant to put there. But they were 9-9 in conference play. What is that con I was talking about? I think it was just their overall in-season production. Maybe I don't know. I don't know what I meant to put there. So I guess their only con I put is they were 500 in conference play. They weren't doing too hot in conference play. I don't know why I said that. I don't know what I meant by early SEC exit. Maybe I just got confused. I don't know. So that sucks. But Texas A&M, they had a B+. They had a really good season compared to expectations. But yeah, I think this is our last team. So without further ado, we have Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt. They would have been the worst team in the league if it weren't for Missouri going 0-18. Or I guess 0-19, really. They had a 19-game losing streak. Pros, Ezra Mignon. He was a very fun player to watch. I loved watching him play. He put up good numbers. And another pro is they were 5th in college basketball at limiting assists. That's kind of a very cherry-picked stat, but teams had the lowest amount of assists against Vanderbilt, so that's good. I don't know if that's good, actually. Maybe that means that their defense was just so bad that teams could just ISO and score. I actually don't know if that's a good thing or not. But they were top in that category, so we'll say that's a pro. We'll keep it at a pro. Because other than that, there's not much pros you could really say about this team. But the cons, since we're done with the pros, they had the worst offense in all of SEC. It was really hard to watch this team play basketball just because they couldn't score the basketball. I was going to say something super disrespectful. I'm not going to say it. I'm going to say it, but I'm just going to let you guys know I don't actually mean it. I was going to say their women's team could probably outscore them. That's really disrespectful. I'm not about to say that. So I take that back. I just want to say so you guys knew what I was thinking. But no, I don't agree with that anymore. But yeah, they had the 13th seed in the SEC. They were second worst team in all of SEC. They had the early tournament exit, and they were the 292nd defense in all of college basketball. So not only were they the worst offense in the SEC, they were the worst defense, and they were the 292nd defense. Actually, they weren't the worst defense. The only team that was worse than them was Alabama. But then again, Alabama has the best offense. So just let that number sink in. In all of college basketball, they had the 292nd defense on top of the worst offense in the SEC. What are we doing, Vanderbilt, bro? Like, maybe I'm going to take that statement back, and maybe the women's team could beat this team. I don't know. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but Vanderbilt might have had the worst season. I probably could have put them at an F as well. Now that I'm looking at it, they didn't have anything really good. The only reason they're not at an F is because they're not. I could F plus. I changed their grade to an F plus. Looking at this stuff, they are an F plus. They're just slightly better than Missouri, only because Missouri didn't win a single conference game. They're an F plus. Sorry, Vanderbilt. I'm looking at it now, and you guys are an F plus. You guys are not a D minus, because I think a D minus went to. I think maybe Georgia had a D minus. They were worse than Georgia. As simple as that. They are a D minus. But I think